Hey everyone, welcome back to Unlearn with Bianca. If you are tuning in for the first time, then welcome. On this podcast, we explore everything around self healing, health, personal growth, the mind body connection, relationships, and more. Hey guys, today I am speaking with Teodora Pile. Teo is a somatic coach and trauma repair facilitator. Welcome, Teo.
Welcome. Thank you, Bianca. It's a joy to be here and an honor.
Nice to have you. I'm really excited about this conversation. So, just for some context, Teo and I met in London all the way back in 2018. We were studying the same course at the time. And ever since then, I have been following Teo's work really closely because not only does she have a really good understanding about the brain and had her own recovery story, but she's also gone on to do a huge amount of study and has a huge amount of knowledge about the nervous system, rebuilding safety in the nervous system, trauma, neurobiology, somatics, all of those words, all of those things that you guys have probably seen on Instagram. Teo can actually take it that step further and help us understand. So, really looking forward to this conversation. So, Teo, just to kick us off, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and what led you into this area?
Yes, it's my pleasure, and thank you for having me. So, yes, I can be called many things, many names, but for the moment, I settled on, yes, somatic coach and trauma repair facilitator. And that's because this is kind of where my work is and how it's deepening and expanding. But yes, how I got here, my healing journey kind of started in 2016.
Mm.
So I have had many symptoms: anxiety, depression, chronic pain, and many other perfectionism, OCD, many other things added to the list.
Long list
Yes,
that many of us have.
exactly. It's never just one thing,
Never.
and never. And then in 2016, I took the lightning process. And then that's completely transformed my life. So that's kind of, I noticed in a way how I was able to basically regain my health, have choice in terms of how I want to be and how I can coach myself in a more healthy, positive way. And I did that while I was still working in the city of London in the corporate. I have corporate background, and then in 2018, while I was continuing with my job, I had just not moments, but probably a period of time when there were a lot of changes at work. I kind of started to feel that this is not what I want to do. And then I remembered in 2016, after I did the lightning process and I regained my health, I said, if I can do it, I would love to be able to help others do the same because it was just incredible. So in 2018, I started training. So my current, yes, is in NLP, the lightning process, while still having a full-time job. And like any of us do, we don't just give up our
It
life.
is also intense. I remember that too. It is a lot to be studying and working and trying to make it work, trying to forge out this new
Yes.
career through a passion.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Yeah. And then kind of gaining the qualifications, getting all of that in 2020. I was also in a very, very stressful job, which was completely opposite to what I wanted to do. I quit my job, and that was right before the pandemic.
Mm.
So all of a sudden, um, kind of being stuck at home, and where we live in UK in West Oxfordshire is I didn't necessarily have a community. I didn't have a fixed income
Mm.
at the beginning of a business. I just started to notice that a lot or some of the adaptation I didn't even know were there started to come up.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And kind of what I was doing, or the tools that I had up until that point, and they worked brilliantly,
Mm.
they weren't working, or they
Mm.
weren't working as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I was noticing I was doing a lot just to keep myself on a kind of survival
Mm.
level. And even that wasn't working. And I'm a very curious person. My background is in legal, in IT. I said, what is going on? And then I was fortunate enough through one of my mentors, through another training that we were doing. One of my mentors started talking actually on Instagram and on email about trauma and developmental trauma and the nervous system. And honestly, I could feel as if she was talking to me. So a
Mm.
lot of the things that she was saying were really resonating. So all of a sudden, things started to make sense. That there was something deeper in my biology, in my physiology, in the way I was moving, operating, that kind of was operating a lot from survival, and it couldn't find a level of safety. And
Mm.
then, because I am very curious and very determined, if I got something, I will do it.
Your mind to
Yes,
it.
I yep. In late 2020, I joined a program, and then I started to notice big shifts in myself, mostly kind of working with the physiology,
Mm.
with the deep nervous system work. And then I reflected on it, and I was thinking, okay, this is interesting, because I kind of tried them on my own. It's like, oh, I can actually be and move into the world in a different way without efforting, without having to change kind of my mindset or to do a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
There
Mm-hmm.
was something inside me, or there was more capacity inside of me that was enabling me to move forward, to be lighter, to have more hope, joy without efforting. So then I thought, okay, I think we're getting into something. So from there, yes, I started training in NARM, Neuroaffective Relational Model, which is a model working specifically with complex trauma and developmental trauma, then somatic experiencing, and now more recently this year, transforming touch and neuroaffective touch. So working specifically with touch or self-directed touch to support the nervous system on a deep level, specifically for developmental trauma. Because through not only through my studies, through do a lot of reading and experience, I could see that a lot of our adaptation, that's where they come from, and also where the split between the mind and the body comes, not only from kind of what society and modern medicine tells us, but also within ourselves. We have a split between the mind and the body. And
Mm-hmm.
this deep work really helps to create this relationship between the mind and the body.
I'm so interested in this whole, I mean, this whole area, but just taking it that step further and delving into something that you felt was missing for you. I think it's just so powerful. So actually, a question that's coming up for me, when you say that you took time to reflect and you could see at the time when your tools that you had gained weren't working at that point, when you heard about developmental trauma and the nervous system, was there anything in particular that really stood out to you that you connected with, that you were like, this is the missing piece? Was it feeling disconnected to your body? Was it the way you were showing up in life? Was there something that your teacher at the time had just said that you were like, this is where I need to head?
Mm, yes. That's a very good question, Bianca. But what's coming for me is, first of all, what I would say is from an emotional perspective, but there's nuance here, because, and also what I want to share is that even in this work, or everything we share is not black and white. It's very nuanced and also very personal. But one of the things that I began to realize is perhaps the ways that I was relating to myself. So perhaps some of the patterns of self criticism were showing up, or some of the perfectionism, some of the efforting that I used to do consciously or unconsciously. And I mean, I changed a lot. I healed a lot, even those patterns.
Mm.
But when I understood kind of the root cause of them and those core adaptations, then when something clicked. And actually, one of the root adaptation is, especially for developmental trauma, is the toxic shame or the self-shaming. that we do. And then when I got to understand that actually self-blame, self-criticism, self-judgment, perfectionism, they were all rooted in this self-shaming ways of relating, not only to myself, but most of us do this.
Mm.
I got to really work on some deep stuff.
Wow.
And that's because, and the reason I say this, and this is what is core in terms of developmental trauma, or trauma in general, is because, but especially with developmental trauma, because developmental trauma is mostly attachment wound or relational trauma or emotional trauma. And what happens is, as children, we cannot think we are good in a bad environment. We cannot say, oh, my caregivers did this. It's their problem, not mine. I am good. No, a child will never do that. It's impossible because it has to maintain the safety, even though it's unsafe, that relational safety. So in that situation, mostly unconsciously, we begin to split from our aliveness, life force, and we begin to say, oh, it's not a problem with the environment. It's not a problem with the people around me. I am the problem. I am bad. I must have done something. It's my fault.
So the shame gets mirrored back at yourself when really you just didn't have
Yes.
mental
Yes.
capabilities at the time to actually, yeah.
Exactly. Yes. So that was the first thing. The second would be in terms of really working with the body, but it is, as I said, this deep nervous system. So how to support especially the stress organs. What does it mean? Working with the adrenal glands, working with the digestive system, working with the brainstem, working with the joints. In such a deep level that you start to build more capacity, more space, and more regulation inside without kind of conscious effort. There's a different baseline, and this is what it is creating a baseline. And for most of us, or for people that have had various degrees, I said it's a continuum developmental trauma. If we had it, and most likely most of us had, we probably won't have a baseline regulation. We won't have a baseline of safety, of internalized safety, of a sense of okayness. So then we can try and effort and do all of the hard work, somatic practices, mindset practices, coaching therapy. We will do all of this, which will feel like a lot of hard work, and we're still gonna, I don't know, trip over, or we're still gonna get triggered, but the time that it takes us to recover will change. Or
Interesting.
it can change.
Really interesting.
Yeah, so this is what I started to notice.
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot around the striving to push harder to get your health back or to make change, which goes very much against my belief around healing in general, which requires removal of layers and getting to the core of the
Yeah.
issue. But yeah, really fascinating. Thank you for sharing. So you've already answered one of my questions, and that was, given the fact that many of us have many experiences growing up and no parent is always doing the right thing, there's no such thing, I would assume that many people do have developmental trauma. Would that be a correct assumption?
Yes.
On a continuum? Yeah.
On a continuum.
So
Absolutely.
the work that you do could really benefit all of us.
I would say so.
And what about the
Yeah.
link between developmental trauma and chronic illness? And if we don't take it as far as chronic illness, just nervous system dysregulation. So obviously this is becoming more researched finally, and it's becoming more mainstream now. Can you help people listening understand how something like developmental trauma changes the way our nervous system is responding over time and makes it prone
Yes.
to something such as illness further down the track?
Yes. So the nervous system, or the nervous system main job, is to scan for safety or scan for threat. So it's always looking to see if we are safe or if we're in danger. Or the other way to look at it is it looks at patterns or moments of connection or disconnection. Yeah, so safety and connection, the nervous system, or survival, unsafety, danger, which means a disconnect. So and actually, yeah, with the developmental trauma, it can start in utero. And there's been many studies done in terms of how the stress of the mother affects the fetus. And even that is some fascinating stories or research into it. So, for example, if the mother is stressed, the baby in the womb will begin to arch its spine on the outside of on the tummy, so on the belly. So imagine that the spine of the baby is quite high up on the mom's belly, on the outside. So on the external side. So if you think about it, I'm not sure if I'm explaining it
No, I got
right.
it. Clever enough. Yeah.
Okay. So what happens is basically the back of the fetus doesn't have much protection. It's only the layer of the skin and the liquid and everything that it's very close in contact with the world. So if the mother then goes and has all of these interactions where it brings a lot of stress, what will happen to the baby? It's going to become a lot more stressed. Unconsciously, because there is no conscious knowledge. And also, actually, in that mid curve at the back, so the mid back, that's where the sympathetic nervous system begins, which means fight or flight. So if the mother is stressed, the baby can learn very early on, the fetus learns very early on, to stay in a state of tension, of contraction. And it doesn't, or loses that ability to soften, to go into the middle of the belly, to relax. So that could be a first step. The second is the moment, of course, even a birth can be quite traumatic, but the moment the baby is born, it doesn't have online what is called the ventral vagus system, which means that safety regulation. What does the baby already has developed and has online in order to survive is the sympathetic nervous system, as I said, which is at the mid back, starts from there, but then it connects to all of the organs, which is basically helps it to cry, to start to move its limbs, to ask for his needs to be met. That's one. And then the other part of the nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, is developed, but it's actually undeveloped. What does that mean? It means that through the two branches of the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest, through the polyvagal theory, we know that it's got two branches. The ventral vagal, which is about social engagement system, safety, connection, and also the dorsal, which means on a threat perspective, it means collapse, it means layers of freeze, numbness. But on a healthy spectrum of the dorsal, it means ability to relax, to sleep, and to digest. So, going back to the baby, it's got the sympathetic nervous system already functioning, and the dorsal part of the parasympathetic nervous system. Why? Because it needs it for digestion. It needs to be able to digest and to sleep. So what does the baby do? Sleeps, eats, and cries. Dorsal, sympathetic. And then in the first few years of life, the way the ventral vagus develops, this parasympathetic nervous system response, which is about safety, about connection, is through the social interaction it has, is through the attunement that the caregivers, the adults, have with the baby. If he can read the signals, cues, meeting his needs. And if that doesn't happen, there's a rupture in the relationship and there's beginning to be patterns of misattunement. That's what I would say is the beginning and the lighter spectrum. But of course, then later on we can add Even early on, unfortunately, in some cases, we can add neglect. So
Mm.
on top of misattunement, we can add neglect.
Mhm.
We can add abuse.
Mm.
So all of this creates patterns of deep regulation in the baby's and the toddler and the child's nervous system.
Mhm.
But I will also say it's not only the nervous system, it's the whole mind-body system.
Mm.
It's not only the nervous system, it's the immune system, it's the endocrine system, it's the skeletal system, the muscular system, and of course, the brain, the development of the brain, which of course the development of the brain and the nervous system very much impacts the mind and the mind's ability to function and take the information from the brain and the
Mm.
body to make sense of the world. Yeah.
Absolutely. Wow.
And also what I want to add is that definitely in the first 18 months of life, we don't have, or 2 years, we don't have, so it's called pre-verbal, we don't have words to
Mm.
explain our experiences. So it's all based on this, what is called implicit memory, i.e. body-based memory. So consciously, we don't know, oh, on this date, when I was 1 year old, this happened. My mom left me to cry for 1 hour because something happened.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
we don't know,
Yeah.
but our bodies will know
Yeah. Sure.
through the patterns of bracing, of tension, of collapse, or constantly wanting to run,
Mm-hmm.
move away from things. So
Mm.
this is how these adaptations get created.
Mm-hmm.
And how we actually begin to disconnect from ourselves, because that's what we do. Then we begin to disconnect from the body, and then we'll disconnect from our minds, or we stay a lot in our minds.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, there's so many factors, isn't there? The pace of today, developmental trauma, um, a lot of factors that disconnect us from our bodies or our mind and our body and the way that we approach health in general, which is changing slowly, I think. So, yeah, it's just so interesting. So, people that connect to what you're saying, even though, again, consciously they may not, they won't remember an experience, but they may connect with what you're saying. As we start to get older and notice these patterns of dysregulation or stuckness, what would it look like to do this kind of trauma somatic work to start to regulate the nervous system? You mentioned touch. What other ways do you work with your clients to really create some safety back into the body?
Yes, and I'm also realizing I haven't quite answered the question between
Oh,
developmental trauma and chronic
you're
illness.
welcome to circle back. I forgot about that bit too.
Yes. No, that's okay. So what I wanted to say in a way, this long conversation about how the fetus develops, how the baby and the nervous system developed, is what happens is if, let's say early on, and it doesn't necessarily only early on, but then if throughout life, then we had these experiences where we have been misattuned or neglected, and we learned early on very quickly that, oh, it's not safe, that I have to adapt and be a certain way to please other people, to make my caregivers, my parents love me because I'm not seen the way I want to. This creates a lot of unsafety and disconnect. And the more we are disconnected and the more unsafety we feel, and it's not consciously, it can be consciously kind of we feel the anxiety, but a lot of it is unconsciously, is through these patterns of bracing, of tension, which then, if we keep on bracing in tension, we get what? Chronic pain. And also, we get to chronic pain because because we have been disconnected, we never been aware of the acute pain, of the when that pain begins to very slowly come up. Because we're disconnected, we don't even notice that. We notice only when it's in the chronic, with migraines, with back pain, even all sorts of things that happens. So that's
Exactly.
one. And then on the other spectrum, so let's say, of course, autoimmune disease is very much linked to this dysregulation of the nervous system because the immune system kind of stops working. And then, for example, with chronic fatigue, or that is very much, on one hand, is related to this adrenal fatigue, i.e., the adrenal glands constantly pumping cortisol,
Mm.
and they don't have rest. And also, the more in a way we push ourselves, we get to this point where our body says, I can't do it anymore. So on the surface is the fatigue, but underneath, there's a lot of activation. There's a lot of this sympathetic fight flight energy that has nowhere to go.
Yeah.
So this is kind of how we, and of course, it's not only developmental trauma. It could be, on top of that, any types of shock trauma. And not only that, stress.
Yeah.
And here, because trauma and stress are on a continuum, it doesn't always have to be trauma. It can be stress.
Mm.
But keeping ourselves in patterns of acute stress and chronic stress, unfortunately, won't take us to a healthy, thriving place.
Absolutely. I always remember thinking until I had chronic pain, I never really had any awareness of my body whatsoever. Like that was the first time I'd ever consciously had to focus, my energy into my body, usually because I was trying to think about where the pain was and what was going on. But until then, I really felt like I could have been cut off, shoulders down, completely numb. And I think this is often what symptoms do. They really force us to look at, well, connect back into both the mind and the body. I always remember having that realization. So, yeah, thank you so much, Teo, for explaining it. I think so many people listening, actually, I know so many people listening will relate because I have these conversations with my clients, but you've just taken it that one step further. So, in terms of again, it's that bottom up, creating safety back into the nervous system. Where do we start with that? Or what would you recommend as a starting point?
Yes. So, like you said, we talked about, or we mentioned the touch, or as I call it, kind of self-directed touch, because most of my work is online. So we can use it as self-directed touch. So a very gentle touch, kind of either on our arm or on the heart, or just letting kind of where the hand wants to go. But even this is not about, oh, let me place my hand here, or what the mind says. It's really coming into what the body needs and what the body wants.
Mm-hmm.
But also even self-directed touch, or working with touch, it's a skill that we also need to learn. So it's best in a way to done with a person that can support, facilitate that. But very important way to start with is setting foundations. And the foundations, first of all, is what is called orienting. So this is from the work of Peter Levine in somatic experiencing, working with the eyes. So through the eyes, we always look around, and actually through sound, we always scan for danger. We're looking, okay, where's the next tiger coming from?
Mm-hmm.
So this is called a defense orienting response. But what we could do is we can use it consciously to relax the muscles around the eyes and begin to slowly move the head, move the neck, and move the eyes. So it's kind of to help to connect with the environment, but very slowly. So
You
very
guys can't see
slowly.
this, but I'm doing it on camera as we speak. It's very relaxing. I
Yeah,
have
so
done it before. It's like,
orienting. Yeah, so it kind of helps consciously to look for cues of safety.
mm,
That in this moment, there could be elements that are okay. So we're looking at objects, colors, and then we can rest, or we can look a bit, and then we can find something we like and we can rest upon it.
mhm,
Take in more of the qualities. That's one. Second of all is what is called grounding. And we do the grounding through the feet or through any part of the body. Which means is if we're sitting down, or even if we're standing or lying down, is to bring attention to the points of contact between the body and the surface underneath us. And it's also very good to do it on hard surfaces. And I spend many hours doing this, lying on the floor, on the hard floor, and bringing my attention constantly to the points of contact. So the back of the neck, the back, the arms, the bottom, the heels. And what it does, and the science behind it is what it does, it helps the survival brain. So the brain stem and the medulla, it helps the survival brain to come into safety, into the here and now. To say that I'm okay. And also encourages what is called proprioception, i.e., where I am, where I end, and where the environment or the surface underneath me begins.
Mm-hmm.
So this really helps to bring in safety, and I would highly encourage it to do it. For example, even when we are stressed or when we think about something or we notice anxiety, to constantly work with this, to bring attention to the points of contact. Because otherwise, the survival brain will take us out of the present moment.
Mm.
And the body it's always in the present moment. The body is not in the past or the future, it's here. The mind travels, the body is here.
Mm.
Yeah, so that will be the first two.
Mm.
A third one, which I absolutely love, and I learn it a lot with another one of my mentors, Irene Lyon, is what she calls following the impulse, which means is the same. The more we get to know our physiology, our body, if there's a movement that wants to happen, to let it happen. If there's a yawn that wants to happen, to let it happen. Not to say, oh, hold on, I'm on camera. I should just keep very pretty, very nice, and I shouldn't be yawning or I shouldn't be moving. To let our bodies move. If, for
I like
example, we want to adjust the position in the chair, to let ourselves do that.
Hmm. I like that one. I haven't heard of
Because,
that before. So just
yeah,
because as you're saying that, I'm thinking, do we often stop ourselves from doing that? But maybe we do. Maybe I'm completely unconscious to it. I feel like I'm always moving around, but there's
we
probably
do.
little things that I stop myself from doing.
Hmm.
Yeah, interesting.
Yes, we do. And on the other hand, what can happen is we can follow impulses, but we
Yeah.
follow the survival impulses, i.e., to eat, to drink, to smoke,
Yes.
the unhealthy impulses. So
Complete.
on the flip side, if we notice ourselves doing that, like I've got this urge to do something, is actually those are the impulses we want to slow down on. We
I'm
want
so
to stretch time.
because I've noticed my well, I would say it's become conscious, and I have known this for a while, but freeze state or procrastination and unconsciously going to eat for me is a pattern that I notice in myself, and I've really been trying to interrupt that more recently, well, interrupting it more recently, but it's just quite interesting to notice how quickly those unconscious
Mhm.
patterns and ways of being to feel pleasure back in the body and to feel some kind of connection to the body. It's just things that we may have been doing for a long time and been completely unconscious to it.
Yes, and this is kind of yes, one of the first steps is about becoming aware of it. So bringing that conscious awareness to it.
Mm.
What I would, for example, invite you to do if you want to try it as an
Mm.
experiment, when you notice it and become aware of it, hold that impulse.
Mm-hmm.
Just stay with it and notice what happens in your body.
Mm-hmm.
Because actually, underneath that, it's going to be something. And most likely, it's going to be a need that you
Yeah,
haven't
absolutely.
met. And the body finds a way to do that very quickly. And the same when we work with the body is we work very much kind of in stillness.
Yeah.
But what happens is when we begin to slow down, we might notice fidgeting or we might notice things because that's the way of the mind to get in the way of the defense adaptations mechanism to say, you're not going to go there. And
Yeah.
when we actually bring this conscious awareness, like, no, I'm just going to stay still. Just stay still, stay with the impulse, and something else will emerge, something else will arise. And that's the thing to work with. So it can be sensations. So a feeling in the body, we always refer to sensations. So it could be a sensation in the body. It can be an emotion that's attached to it, but not always. It can be words. It can be images, or it can be an impulse to do something, a movement, or a sound.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, I definitely feel like a lot has shifted recently when I've identified some some core beliefs underneath, but I'm going to sit with this and see what comes up. So, on that, emotions. Actually, first I want to ask you about anxiety, because anxiety is very prevalent today. Many people will say, I have anxiety, or they experience anxiety in some form. What is your view on anxiety? Where does it come from? Is it an unmet need? Is it developmental trauma?
So first of all, there's a difference between anxiety and fear. Anxiety, fear is something we feel when we see a real threat. If you see a tiger or a bear right now, you will feel fear and you will run for your life. You will fight for your life, or you might try to please. But that's not going to work very well. Yes, I'll probably do that too, but most probably that won't work for long.
Have a wine with me, tiger.
Exactly. Yes. So fear is something when it's something physical. There's a physical danger to us. Anxiety, on the other hand, it's still felt in the body, so it's still physical, but it's more related to perceived threats, or what we call psychological threats.
Keyword there.
Yeah, perceived threats. So fear, physical threat, actual danger. Anxiety, perceived threat, perceived danger. That's one layer. Another layer is that it becomes patent in us because it feels easier, quote unquote, because it still feels uncomfortable, but it feels easier to feel anxiety rather than feeling what's underneath it, which could be anger, which could be grief, which could be sadness, or even joy. Yeah. So if unconsciously we are afraid of those emotions, anxiety is going to show up. It's like, don't worry, I'll do this for you.
Protect you.
I'll protect you. I'll take the lead. Indeed. But of course, we do feel it in the body. It will have physiological symptoms, so heart rate, sweating, palpitations. But also, what I want to say is that even though we feel those sensations don't necessarily mean anxiety. Another layer is that we associate certain sensations and we call them anxiety. Because we do not have the capacity, or we haven't been taught how to feel them, that it's okay to feel them. So we couple what is called sensations and we give it a meaning.
Yeah.
And in my work, people find it fascinating when I tell them that activation doesn't necessarily mean danger.
Yeah.
If I'm feeling my heart rate going up, if I'm feeling my breath becomes more shallow, it doesn't necessarily mean danger. So that's another.
Yeah, because even if you think about excitement and anxiety, often that's that same sort of sympathetic state, right?
Yes.
That whole point around building capacity to be with emotions, or to first of all identify what's actually coming up. Like you said, we can couple sensations and a label together, but building that capacity to actually be with emotions, because I think I'm speaking for myself, but I think so many of us are not taught how to feel, or we haven't been allowed to feel, or it's very interesting, because I think this is really underpinning so many of the issues and diseases that we see today.
Yes, absolutely. And once again, it goes back to what we were discussing earlier about that misattunement. If I feel an emotion and I don't have an adult, a caregiver, to perhaps look at me and say, oh, I'm noticing you're feeling anger. It's okay to feel anger. I won't know. So if I'm a child and I don't know the language of emotions, I don't have the emotional wheel with me, no one explained it to me, and all of a sudden I feel like I want to throw my toys literally out of the pram. And then I have an adult saying, don't do that, or you should share your toys, or well, you're stupid to do that. We learned very early on, it's like, oh, I
Shut it
shouldn't be feeling this because mommy will be upset with me, daddy.
down.
So, yes, we shut it down. So that's why later on we can learn that, oh, if I'm feeling anger, I shouldn't be feeling that. Let me feel anxiety because that anger has nowhere to go.
Mhm. Yeah. And I mean, Gabor Mate's work is so powerful. He talks a lot about anger and that being one of the main repressed emotions that comes into disease. And of course, there's
It
the
is.
socialization of the way that as females, we socialize to behave and show up, and different factors with that as
Mm.
well. But it's so fascinating. So I was going to ask, because you just were talking about parents, what can parents, I mean, the number one thing we can do for all of us, right, is to work on ourselves and to do the work on ourselves. But as parents, is there anything they can do in particular to really help attune themselves to their children?
Mm. Yes, and the way you frame the question, I absolutely love it because it's about what they can do, what they need to do to be there for the children. So that's a key thing.
Mm.
It's not about fixing the child, it's about turning towards and seeing what happens and what arises in us. One. Second of all, would be what I want to mention is that there is no such thing as a perfect parent.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say it again. There is no such thing as a perfect
I was like,
parent.
say it louder for the people in the back. Yeah, I think we all know that, but I think there's sometimes so much blame and shame, and no one's going to get it right.
Yes, yes, there is a lot of blame and shame externally, but we also do that with ourselves. And once again, that's how the patterns of not enoughness, perfectionism, and all of that get even present in the way we parent or how we feel about ourselves. And one key aspect I want to mention here in terms of there's no such thing as a perfect parent is about this process of rupture and repair. So, because we're not perfect, that means we will make mistakes. That means we will not always be attuned to our children. And by the way, that's impossible. But what happens is about when we become aware of a rupture, of a misattunement, of snapping or not being there for the child. If I can become aware of that and make a conscious effort to repair, to go to the child to say, hey, it wasn't your fault. I got stressed or I had too much on my mind. It's nothing wrong with you. So saying that to the child, there's nothing wrong with you. You're being loved. It's my own thing. So it's very important, this process of rupture and repair. And actually, the part of developmental trauma or relational trauma happens because adults in our life didn't repair with us. They created the ruptures, but they didn't take the time, the effort, or they ever bothered to repair. And the key element is that, in the same, there's research done on this, and I was fascinated when I first heard it, is that parents approximately repair about 30% out of the time. Or to be a good enough parent is to repair approximately 30% of the time. 30 to 35. So if you think about that, that's pretty wild.
That is, wow. So interesting
So
because
there's a lot of,
yeah, no, I was just going to say, I guess every time that they go in for that repair, it's a de-shaming process that happens within the child.
yeah,
Mm.
yes. And also within themselves.
Mm, absolutely.
Because often people, and if you think about it, even adult relationships, I've had experiences of that where kind of it was something off and the
Mm.
other person didn't do anything, didn't say anything, and that's because of their own self-shaming process.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
learned kind of in through my own healing and through my own process is even it's uncomfortable, it doesn't mean it's the end of it. I can show
Hold.
up and say, hey, I didn't like that, or that wasn't very, and I bring it back to myself.
Mm.
Look, when you say that, I felt this, and I'm not saying it's not from a place of blaming, but I'm wondering if we can have a chat about
Yeah,
that. So yes, good enough parent means to repair
yeah.
approximately
Oh, there
30%
you go,
of the time.
guys. There's some stats. So you actually touched on there at the end something I wanted to ask, which was just around all this work you've done, all this study you've done, and you've done a lot. How does life look differently for you now than all the way back in 2016? Is it you
Mm,
feel more connected with your body, your emotions, your health? What's changed? Because the reason I ask is because someone asked me this question the other day. And it's again
mm,
sometimes until we reflect, it's it feels like another lifetime, me even 5 years ago. So what has this work done for you?
yeah. What I want to say, kind of, yeah, 5 years ago, that was definitely a different lifetime. That's for sure. That is for sure. Yes. Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah, and the same really helps that self-inquiry process. Um, First of all, what I would say is that I don't have any symptoms.
Mm.
So that would be a first. I don't have any pains. Um, I don't have, yes, anxiety, depression, or any of that. That would be first thing. And also that comes with a caveat. It doesn't mean that I won't notice sometimes going day to day, doing my activities. It doesn't mean that I won't notice sometimes my breathing more shallow. Or I'm not noticing that actually perhaps I'm more scattered or distracted than other times. But it doesn't mean I'm in a state of anxiety. I can notice it and observe it and just let it be. It doesn't mean that I don't have days when I'm feeling a bit low or I feel like tired or something, but I don't make anything of that. I don't catastrophize and I say, okay, that's it. Here we go. We got to go down that route again. No, it doesn't mean that I won't sometimes have a flicker of an old, I don't know, an old or something, a sensation in my knee or in my back or in my hand. But I can be with it. I can notice it if it's coming. Okay, maybe something wants to be discharged because there's more capacity in my body, so I just let it happen. That's one. Second of all, I would say is the ability to go deeper. So I'll go deeper into my own layers and into my own process. I have the same. I have my own one-on-one support. Part of my trainings, I have to do that anyway. But it started off as part of the trainings, but I do it because I see the depth of the work, which means that even, especially when I work one-on-one with my therapist, is I can go very deep. But very deep, not only in my mind or to beginning to make the connections, deep in my body. I got to the point where I can feel my blood flowing, where I
Wow.
can notice. So yeah, so that visceral connection, my organs, I can get an awareness of my muscles, of my bones, how they connect, of my fascia.
Wow, that's like a superpower. I would love to get to that point.
Yeah, but this is what happens when we work to that deep
Mm.
state of nervous system. And then the same, then how I bring them up into my own, not only my own work but through my own process, and the same how to engage imagery, because of course the mind works very much in metaphors, in imagery, so following that a lot of the stuff, for example, when I work on I have my own healing process, it doesn't specifically comes with memories or in this time this happened. Sometimes it does, but more often it doesn't. It's about having this capacity to work with images, with metaphors, and my own physiology.
Mm.
Another thing will be that sometimes I do more and sometimes I do less. Actually, healing at this level, you do less,
I love that.
not more. You
Mm.
build the capacity to be more connected to yourself and actually discern what is really important and what you want to do.
Mm.
So doing less, not doing more. And the same when I heard my teachers, my mentors talking, I was like, what? I'm healing to do less? Yeah. You realize that you will
Yeah,
do
I
less because you want to rest more, you want to enjoy life.
Exactly.
more.
And I think there's that whole point. I think if you're focusing everything on healing, it's so unsustainable. It's funny because it's another label as well that people
Mm.
can attach to that takes us away from just having a human experience, which includes rest, play, pleasure, fun, joy, all emotions. And yeah, I think it's something to think about because I've reached this point, especially in the last 6 months, that really I feel like I'm bringing in a whole lot of new elements of play and pleasure and fun that have been just as healing as quote unquote hard work and that kind of healing. There's different ways to do it.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. And that's actually when we heal a lot and we give time to integrate and reorganize. And I made a post on Instagram a few weeks ago, a while back, that actually the point of working with the nervous system in healing, it's not nervous system regulation. That's not the end point. Reorganization is the end game.
Mm.
So regulation means that I'm able to function, to be well, I'm not in survival from a variety of symptoms, be those physical, mental, emotional. But that's the first step. Nervous system regulation is the first step. But what we want to get to is where the nervous system begins to reorganize itself in a more sustainable, healthy, active, calm way, because it's not about calm. It's about an active way, a connected way. And the reorganization happens either in tandem or after the integration part. And this is why kind of engaging with life, having connections, playing, having moments of pleasure, of wonder, of awe, those help actually to integrate, which then will take us into this nervous system reorganization. And there's another point that I want to mention is that what we want to get to is we don't want to have only an emotional regulation per se. What we want to get to is an autonomic regulation
Mm.
where things happen inside of us without us efforting, without our conscious awareness.
Right, yeah.
They can work well without us having to do anything. That
Mm.
is what true regulation is, that autonomic regulation, where we don't have to use tools.
Yeah. We're just showing up in a way and allowing our nervous system to be operating in the background. I
Yeah.
love that. Yeah. Anything else? Some really good points. What about just your capacity to hold emotions? I'm assuming that's changed a lot.
Yes, and that would be another thing. Yes, very much about noticing, kind of the process, being able to name it, and what has definitely changed my capacity to move through them, but the same without kind of making a conscious effort. They can go through those 90 seconds cycle on their own. That if I'm feeling anger, I know how to use my body to follow that impulse, to express it, not to act it in or to act it out, to express it in a healthy way. So then it gets to be discharged. And then I can go back immediately to be connected, to be normal, to be there. The
Yeah.
same with sadness. If I'm noticing, let's say, kind of tears, not necessarily mean sadness. I can let the tears come, they will be, and then they will go up. So this ability to move through states is quicker. And the same if I'm feeling something physically or emotionally at the time, it's this quantum leaps where the time gets shortened.
Yeah.
And also, what I want to say is that also at times, and this is why I think I personally believe one-on-one support it's important, is because unconsciously I can get in my own way because I will have my own defense adaptations, my adaptations, my mechanisms coming and saying, no, you're not going to go there. And I know I need, if there's a theme that keeps on coming, I know I need someone to be in that safe space with me to help me relax my defenses so I can go to work with that thing. And what I noticed is that if I have a theme that's come up, it's like, okay, I work it on myself, and it's like, only goes to a certain point. But I can notice that I'm starting to, yes, feeling a bit more fidgety, let's say. So I notice this sometimes in me. And that's because unconsciously I feel a perceived threat. Because I notice that if there's a theme that I want to work with, but I don't have kind of the self attunement, let's say, to be there with myself, and I need another person, I might start to notice this. So then I know, okay, I need to explore this. And I will. And all of a sudden, once that gets resolved, once again, there's more capacity, there's more energy, there's more aliveness, and actually there's a reconnection with my life force.
It's very powerful. So powerful. I'm just sitting here just taking it all in. Thank you so much, Teo. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Because I know that we're coming to an hour now. But yeah, anything else you would like to add before we finish up?
Yeah, I would like to mention, to circle back in a way, also what you said about Gabor Mate with anger. And yes, anger is one of the emotions that we are afraid to feel, or it's the least expressed one. And we might feel anxiety because we are afraid of our anger. And what I want to say is that anger is our life force. Anger is our aliveness. Anger is what helps us set boundaries. Anger is what helps us meet our needs. And yes, there is a lot of research connected to our inability to feel anger. It can also lead to a variety of chronic symptoms. But what I want to mention is that anger, what we see portrayed in the world, is not necessarily a healthy expression. We're afraid of our anger, but actually, what we're afraid of the ways we acted in or we acted out. We acted in through self judgment, self criticism, self hatred. And this is where the anger then gets coupled with the self shaming process. Or we can act it out when we start blaming people, shouting at people, or being violent. And these are the expression that we see in the world. That's not a healthy expression of it. What we want to do is to connect what it's called this healthy aggression. Because before we get to anger, we feel an aggression. There is a fire inside us. And that's the thing we're most afraid of, because we're actually afraid of our own power. And healing, it means being courageous and connected with ourselves, to connect with our life force, aliveness, and power, which also means connecting with this healthy aggression. And that's when we can do good in the world. We could do good for ourselves, and we could do good in the world.
That's so true. So, with the healthy aggression, how do people channel that?
So anger or this aggression kind of comes, it's a rising energy. So it can be like a heat, but it's something that comes from the depths of our belly, our tummy, or from the hips. So it kind of goes up through the heart and it wants to move out. So we will want to move out through our limbs. So through the hands, through the feet, or through the voice, through that facial expression. Yes.
Yeah.
And the way we do it, so somatically, when we work with the body, the way we do this is about what do animals do when they feel they will what? Growl.
Yeah.
So growl, showing our teeth, the nose, and then also using the hands. So kind of what is our capacity, or how safe do we feel to put our hands up to say no,
Push.
no, and to push, or even just to put the hands in the air to say no. How safe do we feel to move the hands outwards on the sides, or even go upwards and to say no?
So just
Because
channel
that means we need,
the body.
yes, because it's about taking space. And this
Absolutely.
is the same circling back to following the impulse, is that when we feel the anger, when we feel this aggression beginning to come up, can we follow that impulse? Can we stay with the movement to channel the energy into the muscles and do, for example, you can squeeze the muscles and do a push in the air or in the wall without hurting, because this is not about hurting ourselves or hurting someone else. To let ourselves growl, to let ourselves crunch the teeth, and then slowly opening up.
Mm. So powerful. So, so, so powerful. Oh, guys, this has like honestly been one of my favorite episodes, and I hope everyone is taking so much from it, just as much as I am. So, Teo, where can people find you, and do you have any offerings at the moment?
Thank you. So definitely on Instagram at Teodora Pile. That's my playground. And on my website, teodorapile.com. And currently, I used to do quite a few programs, but at the moment is just one-on-one work. And that's because I have to be here for my family as my husband is navigating a cancer journey. So because of that, I kind of stopped all of the other stuff and just focusing on this.
Mm.
And that's another thing that I want to mention is that people, as we're going through this and it's happening quite quickly, people ask me, how do I feel? Or, oh, it must be so hard. And I say, actually, it's not.
Mm.
I think I healed so much. And with the support that I have way more capacity to be connected with myself and with him and with my family and doing what needs to be done, but in a connected way, not in a dissociated way. So I would say yes, that's a big
That is
healing
that's
step.
a huge testament to the work you do. And I felt the same as well. I sometimes surprise myself at how much I was able to handle certain moments during the same journey. And I think a lot of that was the work I'd done on myself and honoring emotions, honoring myself, because you have to honor yourself in these moments where life is
Yes.
um, in a season that is difficult. And yeah, I am sending all my love and strength. And I think
Thank you.
it's amazing that you are doing this for yourself and putting clients and everything aside. So, guys, check out Teo's Instagram. She shares some amazing, knowledgeable content on there. I will put her website and Instagram in the show notes, so you guys can just follow that. Thank you so much, Teo, for being here. And I've just loved this conversation.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a great honor and to have this conversation with you. Thank you.